Escape vector plotted. Credited format. Launch.
Welcome, dear listener, to the Escape Vector podcast. Today we have an interview with Andrew Sheridan, the creator of both companion applications for the CyberpunkRED and Mothership tabletop role-playing games. Honestly, I was really excited for this one because I use and am a big fan of both applications, and Andrew was one of the top people on my list to talk to when I started this podcast. If you can believe it, this is Andrew's first ever public appearance. That's right, this is the Escape Vector podcast's first exclusive interview. Let's get to it. All right. Well, Happy New Year and welcome to the Escape Vector podcast, Andrew. How's it going?
Doing really well, and thanks a bunch for having me on the podcast. It's a fun and exciting thing for me. For the last year or two, I've been thinking, man, like one of these days I'd love to go on one of these podcasts or shows or do a live play with someone, but I've been too shy to reach out. So I very much appreciated that you had reached out and asked to set this up because it was exciting on my end as well.
For sure, and I hope you'll get a sense that I'm a big fan.
Good.
So how about we start with you telling us about yourself? Who is this elusive Andrew Sheridan?
Andrew Sheridan is me. I am a software developer and have created a couple RPG companion apps. The two that are currently published are CyberpunkRED Companion and Mothership Companion. With basically they go to the corresponding RPGs of CyberpunkRED and Mothership, of course. And yeah, that's what most people on the internet know me for.
So you said you're a software developer. What do you normally develop?
Professionally, for my 9 to 5, I currently work in vehicle automation, and the company is fairly agnostic towards like what markets we develop for. We try to keep all of the hardware and software fairly independent of markets. So for example, we have projects for agriculture, like mowing and harvesting. We have projects for like automotive, so testing vehicle safety without having a human in the loop, as well as testing vehicle durability, so like running a car around a track over and over and over and over again so that they can test various things on that front. We have projects in like the mining industry, so automating really, really big haul trucks that normally are really terrible hours for a human to be working. And also we try to automate like more dangerous positions so that humans can be operating the vehicles remotely rather than having to be in the cab. That's what I do right now. Specifically, I'm working on our newer like mobile apps for things. Historically, we've just had like a Windows-based piece of software for controlling all these vehicles and stuff. And I'm sort of heading up the creation of our mobile stuff. So the first product that we're hoping to get out the door is for mowing golf courses automatically. So the like fairways that need to be mowed pretty much every day before golfers show up. We're trying to automate these mowers so that one person can go in the morning and just press a few buttons on their phone and say, mowers, go do your thing, mow these fairways, instead of having a bunch of people come in really, really early in the morning to do all the mowing. So that's what I'm working on right now as my 9 to 5, essentially.
Okay, really cool. And where are you based?
I'm based in Utah, in a smaller town up at the north edge of Utah. So we get a fair bit of snow here. It's very powdery outside right now. And yeah, that's where I'm at.
You mentioned your 9 to 5, already some of the companion apps that you're developing for tabletop role-playing games. Do you have any hobbies other than tabletop role-playing games?
I have always been pretty into video games. I grew up with my dad owning a game studio for the first 10-ish years of my life. And so video games were like a big thing to me, and I admired my dad for working on them and just enjoy playing them a lot. That was like my main social outlet as a kid, was having a bunch of friends come over and we'd play Halo and Smash Brothers and stuff. And so now I still play a few games. I've got a pretty strong Discord server that's just a bunch of my lifelong friends and their friends that they've brought in. And so many evenings I'll hop on there and play first-person shooters or real-time strategy games or whatever we're into at the time. And I do a fair bit of that. And then I just spend time with my family. I've got a wife and a nearly 5-year-old son. And so making sure I'm fostering those relationships and making memories for my kid as well. And those are the main things that I do outside of working on these companion apps. I dabble in music sometimes, but I always say that I'm better at buying music gear than actually making music these days. I've got like this nice microphone and all sorts of audio recording stuff and guitars and things, but the companion apps have taken a lot of my sort of like productive free time, if that makes sense. I think of like my video games as my like non-productive, like just social, having fun, unwinding free time. And then I think of things like practicing instruments and making music and working on side projects as like my productive free time. And the companion apps have taken a lot of that over the last few years. So yeah.
Sweet. Well, it's a little late, but congratulations on your family.
Thank you. Congratulations on your family.
Thank you so much. It's been a wild, I guess 3.5 weeks already. Yeah.
How's the baby sleeping?
Not well.
Yeah, that is how it tends to go, and it's
I miss sleep. Help me.
It's wild. Like I don't think that it's something people understand until they're in the thick of it, like how much, not just the like loss of sleep, but the combination of like an infant crying, I think really like kicks on some primal stuff in our brains, and it can be really rough. I remember we weren't planning on having our kid when we did, and it was just the whole fatherhood experience for me has been one unexpected thing after another, and it can be really, really draining, but at times very rewarding. And so I imagine you're very much in the draining stage right now, and it does get better, but it also takes time.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'll take your word for it.
Yeah. It's the first, I think I had heard like it was anyway, I think that like the first 6 weeks I had heard many times can be some of the worst sleep wise. But anyway, every kid is so different, and that's something that I've especially learned with a kid on the autism spectrum, that like kids are wildly unique, and what happens and works for one kid likely won't work for many others. So it's a learning experience.
And when did you, I guess, find out or discover your child had autism or was on the spectrum?
Pretty early on, we knew that he was just like not a typical kid. He wasn't reaching many of the like typical milestones of like crawling and talking and walking, and even before those milestones would have been a thing. He was more of a observer of the world around him rather than like someone who interacts with the world around him. And so we had a suspicion pretty early on. It wasn't until he was probably 3 or coming close to 3 that we got him actually tested, so that he could participate in some autism specific like education programs where we live. And we live in a college town, and it has a really, really strong education program. And so we're like crazy fortunate to have a bunch of really, really good resources here to help us with the process and help him with the process. And yeah, that's sort of a a short version of what the experience with him has been like and when we found out. I think that it doesn't have to be like a main topic, or we've loaded it at the front here, and it doesn't have to be a front loaded thing. But I think that, even trying to decide how to phrase this, I think that there are some people for who becoming a parent kind of becomes their identity, where they sort of often will like give up their hobbies or their interests, or just sort of put everything on hold for their kids. And I think that people who really enjoy having kids and get a lot of fulfillment from that tend to have more kids. And then I think there are people who still have a very strong sense of identity. But even people who have like a really strong sense of identity and want to remain themselves while having kids are still very much shaped by their kids and their experience being parents. And I think that my wife and I very much fall into the second camp of like, we still have our own passions and interests that like we take seriously, but we also very much take being parents seriously. And so I think even though this interview is more for people who are into, tabletop RPGs, and I'm a software guy, so maybe like the tech people or whatever, I think that being a parent is still so much like a part of my identity, and it's like shaped where I'm at today and who I am today, that I'm happy to talk about it. So
Yeah, no, well, thank you for sharing. Well, I'm not living the same experience that you are,
Right.
but I can relate to the thing you mentioned about taking parenthood really seriously, right? And changing and developing through that, or growing through that, while also retaining my own identity and
Right.
some of the things that I really feel are important to me. In what ways do you think your experience of parenthood, and also even getting to know your child, how has that changed you?
Good question. I am a very critical person. I grew up in a household that very much was like rooting for me, but also expected a lot from me. So I was always in like AP classes and like advanced courses, and even like in elementary school, they put me in like a quote unquote gifted program, which is, now that I think about it, it's probably just for kids that were getting really bored and just had different attention spans. So not anyway.
Is that
But
Professor X's class?
yeah, exactly. I am a mutant in some ways that maybe we'll talk about at some point. But no, anyway, point being, a lot was always expected of me, and I remember my parents often they were like very proud of me, but when they would like talk to other parents or family members about like, this is the stuff that Andrew is doing, and like, is it like, isn't this so impressive? Like I felt like doing a good job at things or being really good at things was like my entire identity. And so I have often got into a pattern of like, if I can't do something really well, I won't ever do it in public. Like, I'll never show people the things that I'm bad at, so that they can only ever see the things that I'm good at. And also sort of having, like I was saying, sort of the upbringing that really focused on like excelling, and sort of almost, it felt often like taking credit for the things that I was doing, that like my parents could, like, well, look how good he's doing. Like, I get some credit for this. And so having that be my mindset for most of my life, and then having a child both delayed and on the autism spectrum, has forced me to sort of break that cycle of sort of being the sort of parent that is like bragging about how while their child is developing and all these new words that they learned and that they can do the alphabet backwards and stuff, like I can't be that parent, and I'm really grateful that that's the case, because I think that I easily would have perpetuated that cycle, and I would have been that parent if my child was sort of neurotypical. And so that has forced me to break down some of my own mental barriers and to like come to terms with some of the variables that I thought were constants. And it's still a process, and I'm still learning a lot from it, but it is constantly making me more comfortable trying new things and not feeling bad about myself if I try something new and I suck at it. And I think that like these companion apps are a really good example of that, where like I put out the CyberpunkRED companion and it was garbage. Like it was just not very good when it first came out. And that was because that was my first foray into doing like mobile development. Like I was learning a brand new programming language and a new framework, and I had rarely touched meaningful like UI and UX stuff. All of my previous, or most of my previous programming experience was on like the back end of things. So the business logic that controls how things operate and like database stuff. I spent a couple years doing like data conversions for different Secretary of State offices. And so it's just like writing a ton of SQL stuff to convert data from one thing to another. And so doing a very front end project with all these new things that I mentioned, like I did a bad job out of the gate essentially. And I still had the guts to like put that thing out there, knowing that it wasn't done. Like it wasn't complete. CyberpunkRED, the core rule book is pretty chunky. It's like 300 to 400 pages, I think. And I in order to have most of the stuff in there, like in order to play CyberpunkRED and like have all the little moving pieces work in a piece of software, it was going to take much longer than what I put out initially. But I felt I had the ability to do that I could put it out in the world and get feedback and iterate with the inputs of the community, rather than keeping it a secret until I felt it was 100% done and polished and then putting it out there. And I'm so happy that I went that route, because even from a very early stage when it sucked, Artel Sorian, like the guys, the company that put out Cyberpunk and, you know, The Witcher and stuff, the tabletop versions, there were community people from Artel Sorian that saw it and were positive about it, that gave me really great feedback, and were very supportive. And I don't think if I had put it out there when I did, that I'd like be in the position I am today, where like making these apps is a very strong part of like my identity, and has like really, really pushed me to develop myself as a person and to develop myself professionally in ways that it's like also very much benefiting me in my 9 to 5, where I didn't know how to do mobile stuff like 3.5 years ago, and now I'm like heading up this mobile project. So anyway, I think that all of that was stemmed from the question of like, how has, you know, my experience with my child sort of altered me as a person and shaped my trajectory over the last few years. And yeah, it has been a great learning experience that is difficult, but very rewarding, both to see his growth and to have him help me grow.
Well, that's such a, I guess, thoughtful response for a question that I realized as soon as I asked it was a little unfair. It's summing up 5 years
Yeah.
of experience. So, I mean, you took it like a champ, and yeah, no, that's really, really insightful. I guess if we could back up a little bit,
Sure.
actually, first I'll say, I think I came across your app, the Cyberpunk companion app, maybe fall 2021.
Okay.
Um, and
That would
I thought,
be like very early days then, because I think I published October 2021,
okay,
maybe.
because around the time I first started playing Cyberpunk Red, and I mean I really liked it. I think there were some parts that I think were a little glitchy.
Yeah,
Maybe
like many
even
rough edges for sure.
I think things like net running, going in and out of the window sometimes would not quite would like reset the encounter builder or
Yeah.
whatnot. But um, it's to me, it's crazy for me to hear that when it first came out, you thought it was trash.
Yeah, I
Um,
mean, when it first came out, it was pretty much just like stats and skills
hmm,
and like a little background information, but like net running didn't exist. Like, I don't think I had most of the weapons and items and stuff in there, and I definitely didn't have them like modifying dice rolls and stuff, or like roll abilities, as it was another big thing that took a long time, because like every different sort of class has very different specializations and stuff.
let's see. What motivated you then to release it in that state, to take that chance?
Yeah, I think I heard about Cyberpunk Red before 2077 came out, and B, before like the core Cyberpunk Red rulebook came out. At that point, it was just like the quick start kit, and I think I saw a video on like Polygon of them doing sort of like a one shot, and I was like, wow, this is really, really interesting to me, because that genre always appealed to me so much more than the like high fantasy genres that are typical of like D&D. And I thought that maybe I'd have more success pulling some of my friends into that genre as well. And so I realized, like, if I make an app now with just like the stuff that's in the Jumpstart kit, I can sort of be first to market in a sense. Like, I can have something for this game ready to go before the core rulebook even hits shelves. And then I can quickly sort of move it from being the jumpstart kit to the core rulebook and have a lot of the groundwork already done. So that I can just like be first to market. And I realized that it was like my timing for discovering this thing was pretty opportune, and that if I didn't take it, that like I'd never know. And I had a feeling that like eventually I could do a good job, and that it would be a project I enjoyed doing, and maybe possibly hopefully it would get my friends to play Cyberpunk with me, because I know how helpful having companion software can be for like making a character in a meaty tabletop RPG. um so yeah, that's what motivated me to publish it in the state that it was I wanted to get it out there. I wanted to be first to market. I wanted to have something for the jumpstart kit to get the existing fan base aware of it, so that when the core rulebook came out, that people could be like, oh, download to tell their players, download this app to make your character, because then it could sort of become the de facto in a way. And I didn't even think that like later down the road that Artel Sorian would start to say, this is the official companion app, like just download this thing, and them advertising it was huge for the app success for sure.
Wow. So you said, I think 3 years ago, you didn't have any experience with mobile development. Um, I mean, at the time that you released the Cyberpunk Red app, it's roughly around that time. So was it
Yep.
stressful trying to get this thing off the ground and put it out there?
A little bit, but it was also a lot of fun and really engaging. Like, it was pretty much all I was doing in my free time at the time. I sort of gave up video games for like a year or so, and was just like always working on app stuff. And I was just learning so much and having so much fun with it, and getting such like positive feedback for the most part from the community, that it sort of like propelled me to like want to do more and more. And there were definitely stressful parts. I think that the most stressed I ever was for the app was I had a bug where like your characters could just disappear. Like you could just lose everything randomly. And I had no idea what it was. And it was after I had performed like a big data migration from like a database that only worked on Android and iOS and was like a relational database type of thing. Because that's what I was comfortable with. That's what I'd come from, was like relational databases. And I eventually realized, I want this software to run on more than just Android and iOS. And I also don't want to have to deal with a more rigorous relational database going forward. Like I want to be able to iterate more quickly, and the package that I was using at the time, it just didn't vibe with me very well. And so I had like done this data migration and I was really happy with the results, but then I started getting periodic, and it wasn't like all the time, but it was like every once in a while someone would email me and be like, hey, I lost all my characters. What's going on? And it took me a while to figure out why that was the case. And I felt real stupid about it. But I just remember being so stressed because I was like, this is the sort of thing that like, if it happens enough, that people will stop using this app. Like I would stop using the app if one day I opened it and all of my stuff was gone and I was like a GM that had a campaign ready. And so I think that like breaking bugs, definitely like the most stressful thing, because I'm running a one-man operation, at least for CyberpunkRED. And so it like all fell on me to like get this thing figured out, to get it tested, to get it out the door. And so that was like the most stressed I had been. And then there are like tiers of stress below that, where there's a sort of like underlying stress, especially in the early days where I knew I was missing a bunch of very important features, like when role abilities are missing or like net running stuff is missing. I would just get emails all the time from people saying like, this app is not usable until it has these things. And me being like a very, very critical person, especially of myself, I just had this internal dialogue going all the time of like, your app's not good enough. Your app's not good enough. And that was when it started to turn from being like a very fun, like new, engaging thing to like a second job, essentially, where there was a good stretch of me working essentially the jobs of a second hour to get this app to like where I wanted it to be and where people wanted it to be. I'm pretty happy with the state that it's in now, but the problem I run into these days is Artel is so good about putting out new content for Cyberpunk. I mean, they're putting out free DLCs like every month. And now they're starting to do like paid content as well. Like we've got Black Chrome that came out several months ago, Danger Gal Dossier that just came out recently. And now they're going to be putting out like a separate Edge Runners book that's kind of tying into 2077 a little bit more tightly. And so now the problem I run into is, A, people asking me, hey, when is this going to be available in the app? And B, that internal dialogue of mine saying like, you need to get this out. You need to get this out. But I don't have a copy of it until it's out, essentially. And part of that is on me because Artel is like really hands off, which is super nice, but they're also very, very helpful when I ask for help and when I go to them. But often it comes down to like, if I'm not keeping my finger on the pulse of Cyberpunk very well, before I know it, like another paid book can be coming out like in a week, and I reach out to them and I'm like, hey, can I get a copy of this so I can start work on it? And so it's like rarely do I have it like with enough time in advance to get it out the door at the same time as the published version. And again, that's mostly on me. Like I'm not at all trying to throw Artel under the bus. They're like, again, very, very supportive. But anyway, that period between a book coming out or a DLC coming out and me putting it into like a digital version in the companion app can also be stressful for me, because I want this thing to be the official companion app, and I want to be like tightly integrated with what's going on. But at the same time, it's like I put a lot into my 9 to 5 job. Like, I'm a dad, I'm a husband. I also have, this is no longer a thing that I can do to like blow off steam and as like a fun hobby. Like, this is now a second job that I enjoy most of the time, but sometimes is also very stressful. And so that to answer the question of it being stressful and when it was stressful and was it stressful to put it out the door, those are some of the stresses that I faced from launch and onwards, relating to that companion app.
Yeah, that's really interesting to hear about. I guess those sorts of challenges. So to me, it's not clear. What is your relationship with Artel Saurian then? You started as an unofficial fan-made app, essentially. Then they brought you in. Why aren't you more integrated with the team?
It's mostly, I'm sure it's just because I haven't asked to be more officially part of the team. And I think that most of them are probably fairly localized. I don't know if they have like a lot of, I mean, they coordinate with a lot of people and have a lot of like community members contributing to their physical media. But yeah, I've never asked like, hey, can I be like an employee of Artel Saurian, or can you keep me more tightly in the loop? There were periods where I was more tightly in the loop. For example, when like the core rulebook was releasing, and in sort of those early days, they had a Discord channel for, it was mostly for like the proofreaders and testers of the thing to give feedback and be like, hey, we feel like this needs tweaking, or we found a typo here. And then they would update them on like, here's a new version of the PDF. So I was involved more tightly at that point in time. But yeah, now it's sort of like I become aware through the community that like, or just from their newsletters that like something is coming out, and then I'll reach out and say, hey, can I get a digital copy? I'm the app guy, and they're good about getting me the stuff that I need. But yeah, I still operate very much as like an independent sort of community software guy that they support.
Okay. I understand what you were saying before. I don't think it comes off like you're throwing anyone under the bus.
Good.
And yeah, for what I hear from other collaborators and what I expect kind of looking and observing, right, and following Artel Saurian, I wouldn't think that they would do anyone dirty.
For sure. They've never done me dirty, and I think that they're very good at interacting with the community, but they're also just, I think that they're just very hands-off with a lot of stuff. Like they are the sort of person or entity that it's like, if you need something, you come let us know, but we're not going to sort of meddle with what it is you're working on, or like they give you the room to have creative liberties and stuff. And I think that they just have a lot going on. I mean,
yeah, I like that that approach, but I'm wondering, I'm sure they keep other collaborators in the loop, right? Just another person in an email chain.
Right.
To me, it would make good sense that you are that other person in an email chain
For
that
sure.
gets, that advance notice. So
Yeah.
are you, how does it work? Do you license the app? How does the I guess the licensing work? What's the relationship there? Are you licensing content from them to put into the app? Maybe I'll just leave it at
Yeah.
that.
So I have a license with them to sort of be able to publish the app and paid content for it, where they give them a small royalty for the stuff, the sales that it has. And that's pretty much like the extent of it. Where it makes things tricky is, for example, one of the most commonly requested things that I get from the community is translations, translating it to Italian or Spanish or Russian or whatever, is probably the most frequent email that I get. And the problem is that I only have the license to publish an English digital version of all of the stuff from Artel Sorian, because they sell the license to publish their books in other languages to other publishers. And so for me to be able to publish a Spanish translation, I have to get a license from the Spanish translation people, which means that I also, if I want to do another language, have to get a separate license for that separate translation. And at the end of the day, it's like I'm a one-man operation. Even if I put in the work to get like a crowdsourced translation thing going, or if I just like rip stuff straight from the books and did the best that I can guessing, like I know a little bit of Spanish, but I've no clue about anything else. And so I'd be guessing where things are. And so like I probably need some community intervention to help me get the translations for things right. And even if I did all that, like I'd still have to set up those like legal agreements and would likely still have to pay royalties to like all these different people. And at the end of the day, I'm just like, I'm sorry, like I would love to translate, because that would that would make the app more successful, but B, it just is like getting it in the hands of more people. But at the end of the day, it's just like while I'm working another full-time job, I don't think that's something I'm capable of. And the whole me working another full-time job thing could be a variable. Like one day I would like to making apps like these ones my full-time thing. Like it is my main source of income, and I can just focus all of my creative and productive energies on that. And I think that will happen one day. But they just don't pull in enough money right now for me to feel confident in being like, sorry, full-time employer, goodbye to insurance and all that fun stuff. But I do have a plan, and one day, like I very much mean to making apps, self-published stuff my main thing, because I have tons of ideas. Like I have a lot of stuff I want to put out there, even just for like the apps that are out now. Like even for Cyberpunk and Mothership, I have tons of stuff I'd love to do for them, but I just don't have the time or the energy to do it all.
I mean, to pull off, let's say the translations, yeah, it's not as simple as maybe someone might think. It sounds like you need a team.
Yeah.
Is that something you envision, kind of working with others, or delegating these kind of translations to others, if your relationship with Artel Sori and other licensees or licensors like permits that? Is that something that you feel comfortable doing?
Yeah. So the thing, to answer your question, yes, 100%. Like I would involve the community in getting the translations done. I would probably do a bunch of legwork to put up like a website somewhere where I'd be like, here are the English translations of all the items and all of the skills. And like, it's kind of terrifying. Like the amount of work to be done outside of like the legal stuff. It's like very daunting, because there's just so much text in the app now. I mean, it's the core rulebook is huge. There's just so many items and characters and stats and stuff. Anyway, just even if I had the translation like in front of me ready to go, in like a easily used data format, it would still take a lot of work to like pull out all the stuff that's just English hard coded right now into like an indexed thing somewhere where I can look up the translations for different things. Like that's already a lot of work. And then putting together a community tool where people could come in and translate the stuff is going to be a lot of work. And then there's of course the legal stuff and the handling royalties regularly that again, I'd love to do it someday. And I think that provided in a few years people are still using the app and playing Cyberpunk and stuff, I think I'll do it, and I'd love to do it, but right now it's not in the cards. And yes, I would very much get the community involved. The thing that I am scared of doing as far as community involvement is just making the whole project open source, because then it's so easy for people to just come in and be like, okay, I'm gonna clone the repository. I'm going to translate some of the stuff into my language in just like the hard-coded stuff. I'm not going to do all the extra work to make it localizable. And then I'm just going to publish it and sell it on my own. Because, and I get a lot of people that want to do that. And I know that people want the app in their language, and I want to put it in their language, but also I put so much work, like hundreds, over 1,000 for sure. I don't know if I'm in thousands territory of like hours spent on this thing, but it's like I've put so much time into it that I'm very protective of it. And I am like so afraid of, if I were to open source this thing, that all of a sudden it would just be taken and other people would republish it, and I would lose my hope of being able to do this stuff full time in the future, or at least it'd be delayed by years. And so maybe one day I get to the point where I can open source parts of it, and I keep the core of it sort of private, so that, and honestly, that'd probably be really helpful for some of the stuff that I'm struggling with right now, which is keeping up with our Telsorian as they publish new content. But anyway, that's a whole nother thing. Yeah, but yeah, your answer was, would I get the community involved, or your question was, would I get the community involved? And yeah, absolutely. Like I know that there are a bunch of people that are eager to help and that are capable of helping. And I think that sooner rather than later, I probably need to get people involved to make a team out of it and get that ball sort of moving forward, because I'm getting behind, and I was caught up, and now I'm absolutely not caught up. I'm close on Danger Gal Dossier though. The big problem I ran into with Danger Gal Dossier is I decided, oh, now is a great time for me to upgrade like all of my dependencies and upgrade my Flutter version. Flutter being like the tech, the framework that I'm building all this stuff off of. And I just kept biting off like more and more things where I'm like, I'll do this. Oh, and before I knew it, I was in like a total design overhaul because I want to put in new themes for like Danger Gal. And so it wasn't just doing Danger Gal now, it's like refactoring huge chunks of the code base to adhere to my ideals now rather than my ideals of 3 years ago when I didn't know a whole lot of what I was doing. So,
wow. I do want to show the Mothership companion app some love.
Right.
So if it's okay with you, we can jump into that. So we just heard about what led you to develop CyberpunkRED and some of the stories around that process and experience. What led you to develop the Mothership companion app?
So while I was working on the CyberpunkRED companion, and before I realized how regularly our Telsorian was going to be putting out new content, I had momentum, and I was like, I enjoy doing this, and I think that there's space in this market for more of this, because really, like at the time, as far as I was aware, like D&D Beyond was like the one like sort of tabletop companion software that was like that was focused and targeted towards one thing. Like we still have things that are agnostic and pluggable, like Roll20, that can handle, many different things. But the problem with having a piece of software like that can handle many cases is that it's not amazing at doing any one of them. It's fine. It's good for doing all these things. But if you're writing an app that's specific for like one RPG, then it can be extremely focused and extremely streamlined for that workflow and that process. And so I realized I want to be doing more of this. And so at some point I started, Avatar Legends was coming out, which is tabletop RPG for Avatar The Last Airbender, which I love so dearly. Like it's one of my favorite IPs of all time, if not my favorite. And so I was like, I'm going to make a companion app for this. So I put together sort of a prototype that had all the essentials in it and showed it to the people in charge. And they're like, yeah, this is pretty cool. We'll talk about it. And eventually they got back to me and said, we don't have any licenses for software. All of the like software licensing has been given to these other game development studios via like whatever television network owned the IP at the time. And so basically they were like, we don't have any power to let you make this app, and to get you the power to make this app will be so time consuming. And they didn't have the time for it, and I didn't have the time for it. And so I was like, okay, we're not doing that anymore. And all this time that I was working on Cyberpunk, I was pretty in touch with a guy by the handle of Devianaut, who is the designer for Night City IO, the Cyberpunk map site that's really, really cool. And I don't want to say that he was like a mentor to me during this whole time, because it's like we were sort of doing different things. He's a designer and I'm a developer. But he was a strong motivator for me. Like, he was kind of like my hype man through a lot of this, where we would sort of try and hype each other up for our respective projects. And one day he reaches out to me and says, hey, have you heard of this new tabletop RPG that's had its Kickstarter just recently, called Mothership? And I was like, no, I'll go check it out. And he sent me like previews of some of the content, and I was like, this is pretty cool. And he was like extremely passionate about it. And so he pitched the idea of, let's put together a companion app for Mothership and see what those guys think. And so we put a lot of time into making a really, really good, like, minimum viable product for a Mothership companion app. And got in touch with Sean, who is sort of the father of Mothership, and you guys talked a little bit about on your previous episode of the podcast, and showed it to him, and he was very positive about it. He was really excited. And Seth and I, Devianaut and I, went into the Mothership companion thinking that we would be sort of like a third party, just non like tightly affiliated with the IP and with Tuesday Night Games. And so we tried to make our design sort of like close to, like, inspired by, essentially, by the Mothership design. And so Sean really liked it, but he had a totally different vision of it. He wanted it to become the official companion app for Mothership, and to have all the designs like very, very tightly integrated with the IP. And there was a lot of back and forth on that. And Seth and I were initially like, man, we put so much work into the design of this thing. We're going to be rewriting a ton of stuff and redesigning a ton of stuff, but eventually decided like it makes a ton of sense for us to, at least design wise, make it feel extremely Mothership and be like a very integrated part of this. And so we decided to go that route, put in the time to redesign it. And I think the design of it's brilliant. Like, I'm very, very happy with the design of the Mothership companion. And it was really helpful to have Seth do most of the heavy lifting on the design front, because that's, again, not where my specialties lie. Like, I've gotten pretty passable and a lot better at it. But that's still not where I've put my time and my specialties. And so that was really great. And having Sean involved was also very helpful, because he's very opinionated about his baby, about Mothership, and how it should look and feel and perform and behave. So anyway, we decided we were going to do it, and we sort of soft launched this initial version with one of the like major releases of the digital PDF. And that's where it was born, in sort of the early days of that app.
Well, Sean definitely was right to trust you with that. I guess the digital companion app version of his baby was in good hands. The design is awesome. I mean, both apps are great. I think they inherently have different experiences based on the types of games they are for. Cyberpunk is, like you said, meatier, and so there's a lot more going on. It's a lot more involved. Your app definitely helps streamline things. Mothership, with or without the app, is really like refreshingly easy to run, and your app just does so much, even in lowering that, I guess,
The
barrier to entry.
Yeah.
Even more. I mean, What do you think about the potential impact your apps have made on the two games?
Um, I I don't really want to take much or any credit because I think that both IPs are very strong on their own. Like Cyberpunk was already going to be hugely successful because it has a very rich history, and also because 2077 was coming out, which was going to bring tons of new people into that game. And Mothership already had like an extremely flourishing community and a great Kickstarter before Seth and I ever reached out to make an app. Really, the only credit that I'll give me and Seth for the success of these IPs is just that having these companion apps, I would hope, lends almost some like credibility towards the games, because again, I think that it just lowers the barrier to entry quite a bit. And so to be able to tell a player who has no idea, like never touched the rule books, and maybe isn't that familiar with tabletop RPGs, I think it's hopefully very easy to just tell them, download this app and just follow the instructions. Just like let it guide you in your process of creating a character. And in like a minute, you can come out of it and be like, I have a character. Like I know their stats, I know their skills, I know what they're equipped with, and I'm ready to learn. And I think that that can be so much nicer than sitting down at a table with like a piece of paper and telling them to roll dice like 10 times. So anyway, that's I hope that they lend the IPs and these games some credibility, and that it gives the appearance of them being established. And because again, they didn't need these apps, but I hope that they help.
Well said. I mean, I definitely don't want to undermine the games, right? The bones of the games, or even the meat on those bones too, right? The themes, mechanics, world, tone, all of that stuff, and yeah, all of that stuff that's there. But I really wanted to hear from you and give you a spotlight in this episode. I mean, for me, your apps have played really important roles in my Mothership and Cyberpunk experiences. I imagine that your apps may have or might continue to bring in many new players to these games. For me, as a GM, I presented your companion apps as selling points to my new players. And I mean, approachability and accessibility are really important. I don't know if my fiance and my brothers-in-law would have tried Mothership without your Mothership companion app. And we ended up doing a 10-month campaign. So,
It's awesome.
yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thank you for using it.
It wouldn't have happened otherwise. I have friends that are really into tabletop role-playing games, so it's selling that isn't such a challenge, right? But for others who are sort of new to it, or are only familiar with some of the more popular games and are maybe reluctant to try another system, companion apps do a great job of introducing those players to those games. We heard some of your challenges with developing and supporting the Cyberpunk app. Do you have any stories or challenges about the Mothership companion app?
Um, I think one of the most difficult portions of the Mothership app wasn't at all technical. It was more sort of like legal and financial, in terms of like, when it's just me running the operation, it's easy. It's like, okay, I give Artelsorian their cut for the royalties and I keep the rest after it's taxed by a bunch of people. And so for me, one of the hardest parts going into Mothership was definitely figuring out like, where's the money gonna go if this thing makes money? Because those are just the sort of conversations that I don't like to have and don't want to have, because I don't want to undervalue myself. Like I'm fully aware that these things won't exist if I don't do them, at least these versions of these things. Like that's not to say that someone else couldn't come in and do an app just as good. But I just knew that like these versions of these apps won't exist without me. And so I'm not going to undersell myself. But also it's like, okay, well, but Seth is putting in a bunch of work and he needs to be compensated for this stuff. And we're also using their IP. So like how much of the money is going to go to Tuesday night games? And for me, that was like, and still sort of is a thing that like, as we move through these different stages of the games fully out, and like Seth and I haven't, at least for like our hourly rates, we still haven't made enough money back to sort of compensate for the time that we have put in. And so at some point our like pay structure is going to change. But I think that's been the hardest thing to navigate on the Mothership end of things. Because again, like Seth is such a talented designer that like the design end of things has come together really well. And Sean is also amazing at that. And so like them together figuring that out and then me implementing it went really well. And I also just had so much more experience doing this sort of thing when we started working on this Mothership app. And so, yeah, that was the larger hurdle, because most of this other stuff of actually making it and coming to an agreement on how it should behave and look has worked pretty well, and makes me optimistic for like if I hope that Mothership does really well. I'm eager for it to physically release because I think that that'll give it a lot of traction. I think all of us understand that, like, especially with the pandemic and post-pandemic and production and stuff, that like we get that Kickstarters are being delayed, and I think that Tuesday night games like promised a lot for these higher tiers of Mothership. I mean, they have so many freaking books to put out, and so like it's fine that it's been delayed. Like it's expected that it's been delayed, but I'm just eager for it to like get out there, so that we can gauge what we're able to do next. Because I'd love to do like Shipbreaker's Toolkit content where you can not only like manage the stats of a ship, but maybe design ship interiors. And I'd love to do like a more community driven hub thing where people can post, you know, at like adventures and monsters or whatever. Like people can just post stuff that other people can go vote on and download, whether it's equipment or whatever. There's so many cool things that we can do for Mothership because it's really fostered that identity of being like very community driven, that there's so much cool stuff that we could do, and it's just as a matter of is the money there that like I can put the time in to it when I've also got 9 to 5 and Cyberpunk that are also yelling at me to get stuff done. So but man, I'm really happy with how Mothership turned out and have so many more ideas for cool stuff we can do.
Hell yes to the Shipbreakers expansion that being integrated into the app.
Yeah.
I mean, an encounter builder would be pretty sweet, or even like you said, importing, exporting community made content, whether that's NPCs or equipment.
Yeah.
That's super cool. Hey, Sean, creator of Mothership, if you're listening, let me know when is a good time to break this news to the community. I'd be happy to do that. It'd be such a cool announcement. The app is already incredible as it is, right? For the, I guess, gameplay of 95% of playing Mothership normally. You have everything you need pretty much, but these extra things could be really cool. Or if you're a group that really does want to be on a ship, or that's a big part of your gameplay experience, then yeah, Shipbreaker's Toolkit integrated in there would be freaking sweet.
Totally. And there's like a lot of fun stuff that I know Sean has planned for like unconfirmed contact reports. And so that's another thing that we're like, we'd love to put some of this cool stuff into the app. Yeah.
Right. And for the listeners back home, the unconfirmed contact reports, that's the Mothership equivalent of a NPC or monster book or entity entity book.
Totally. Yeah. So I think that we're all really happy with how it turned out, and there's a bunch of stuff that we'd love to do. So we'll see how this physical launch goes, and go from there.
So you were busy enough doing your 9 to 5 and the Cyberpunk companion app. I don't imagine that that Cyberpunk and Mothership are direct competitors, but overall, what is it like to work on both of those apps at the same time?
It's I'm not very good at context switching, which is like a term that sometimes gets used in software development in like computers for exactly what it just it's like switching from one task to another. Like in computers, there's a cost for that, and I'm just bad at that. I'm very much like a binge person where it's like I work on something or like consume something, whether it's like content or whatever. Like I go really, really hard for a period of time, and then I burn out really, really hard and then fully switch over to another thing. And so I haven't done a lot of like parallel work between the two things. When we were working on Mothership really, really hard, I didn't put out a ton of updates for Cyberpunk. And now I've been sort of more focused on Cyberpunk trying to catch up, and I haven't been updating Mothership as much. But it's difficult. And I even I don't know if you're familiar with like Darrington Press's stuff and Candela Obscura. It's like the Critical Role sort of parent company or parallel company. I don't know. Anyways, they're putting out some RPGs too, and that was like right over a break where I had a bunch of time, and I was like, I'm going to pound out a Candela Obscura companion app and get it in their hands. And I was like really, really happy with how that turned out. And initial talks were very promising. And then I got ghosted for a little while. And while I was ghosted, I realized I can't do 3 apps right now. Like even if I just release this as is and like it's done, I don't want to be getting more emails. Like I'm already behind on responding to emails for these other things. Like I can't handle that right now. And that was like a really good moment for me to realize like my own limitations, because I'd love to get out there and do it all. But I can't. And so for now, it's just going to be Cyberpunk. It's just going to be Mothership. Going to get the stuff out there that I want for them. Like I still have tons planned for both. And then if they get to a point where content slows down for them or the apps are sort of in a solid place, then maybe we'll do another thing. But for now, it is difficult, and I very much have to set aside times where it's my focus. But I really love both games. So yeah.
Yeah, well, I think that speaks to a larger conversation about balance, right? And pacing yourself. I mean, I can relate to that quite a bit. The idea of going really deep into something, right, and trying to still keep a overall kind of like look at things, or a larger perspective, a wider perspective at the same time, not going so kind of granular. But I can imagine that being difficult, and that's with your 9 to 5 and these 2 companion apps. What advice would you give to aspiring app developers?
Ooh, that's hard. I've got like a lot of things in my brain, and I'm trying to like simultaneously decide if each one of them is good advice or bad advice. I would say probably one of the best things that you can do is figure out what parts of it are fun to you and which parts of it are work to you, and really try and find a balance of like when you're working on which. Because if you want these things to be successful, like you're going to have to do a bunch of crap that you don't enjoy. Like I hate dealing with like Play Store and App Store paperwork and like changing crap for them all the time. And if you're also like learning programming, there are going to be a lot of things that you don't enjoy about it, along with the stuff that you do enjoy about it. But I would say like write down, have a to-do list, like use some software. I mean, you can start simple with just like a note-taking app, but I would highly recommend getting into something like Trello or Notion and at least trying to loosely adhere to a software development paradigm of some sort, like Kanban or like Agile or something. But really at its simplest form is just like have a to-do list that are like little cards that are self-contained, like things that need to be done. And as you think of things, don't go in and just try and do them right away. Like write them down, like write down your to-do list. And then when you come to the, I guess before you come to the table and look at the to-do list, it can also be good. Sometimes it's so difficult to see a massive to-do list and be like, this is too daunting. I can't do all of this. So like part of it is having a place for you to put all of your things to do. But another part of it is like creating views into it that are smaller and more focused. It's like, okay, for this feature, I need to do these 10 things. Give yourself a view where you only see those 10 things. And then some of them are going to be things you enjoy doing, and some of them are going to be things that you don't enjoy doing. And when you're having a hard time and you don't really want to get in and do stuff, or you're terrified of the hard things, that's a good time for you to go in and be like, this task is easier and I'll enjoy it, and this task is easier and I'll enjoy it, and just go do those things. Because the important thing is that you're working on it and that you're making forward progress, even if it's slow. Because I think that if you're not accountable to other people yet, it can be easy to stop a thing and never start it again. So I guess, yeah, my first advice is like organize your tasks that you've got to do and find a workflow that works for you so that you can get through it, and then realize that you're going to have to redo things sometimes, and to not get too attached to the way that you've implemented any given thing, because people are going to give you feedback, and a lot of the time their feedback is going to be really good. And I think, especially in like the first year of me doing this stuff, I would get emails that would say like, this would be really better this way, or have you thought about doing this? And my ego was so huge that I would just get upset every time I saw like a review that said something like that, or an email that said something like that. And that would increase my resistance to getting out there and doing stuff. And so once you can sort of let go of that ego and really digest the feedback that you're getting and decide for yourself, is this a direction I want to take it or is it not? That can be really extremely helpful. And yeah, it's a lot. Like I already had a lot of professional development experience before I dug into this. And so I didn't have to sort of figure that all out at the same time as well. And so I understand if it's difficult if you're learning programming and stuff at the same time. But just know there are tons of really great resources out there, and realize that like the languages that you pick and like the frameworks that you pick aren't too terribly important. Like I love like Flutter and Dart, which I'm using right now because it's very, very cross-platform and it's a language that I enjoy using. But at the end of the day, like don't get too caught up in like what's the best like language or framework or whatever. Like try out a bunch of things and figure out what fits your personality and your workflow better. And then instead of focusing on like the language itself or like the framework itself, like you're going to have to learn them, but I just recommend learning good software principles. There are like design patterns out there for like object-oriented languages if you're getting into that, or just learn good programming principles, because having good code and a good process, like writing unit tests as you go along for the important stuff, is not only going to make the quality of your software better, but it's going to improve all your future projects drastically, and it's also going to make you way more employable. And I guess my last piece of advice for people who want to do not only just companion apps, but like side projects that are software related, is just realizing that like probably the most valuable thing of the whole process is just like you and your abilities sort of developing as you go through it. Like even if you make an app and you put it out there and it makes no money, you have become so valuable as a developer for doing it. Because if you can show up at an interview and be like, you can download these apps right now, Like you have such an edge over anyone who shows up with like a nice looking resume, but can't show anything. Because these employers just have to take those guys at their word that they've done these things. But you can say, here's something I've made. If we want to look through the code, let's look through the code. Let's talk about the things that I did design wise and like the hurdles that I came up against. Employers, or at least good employers and good interviewers, will love that stuff. And they'll still have like questions for you, like technical questions to answer, to ensure that you have some basic understanding. But again, similar to like the ego death of listening to user feedback for your applications, if you go into an interview and you don't know the answer to a thing, saying I don't know, and then saying this is maybe what my best guess is or what I think, or my best stab at solving this problem, and then showing your thought process. Like I think good employers also eat that stuff up. Like employers and interviewers love someone who can say, I don't know. Like that person is so much more preferable to someone who comes in and pretends to be a know-it-all, or comes up with excuses for why they don't know a thing. Like that's such a red flag, because like at the end of the day, if a technical person is interviewing them, they're trying to determine not only like if you can do the job, but if you're someone that these people will enjoy working with and if you'll work well with the teams. And so being humble and being able to not know the answers to everything, but to accept input and be taught is extremely valuable. So I guess that's the advice that I give to people that are making their own projects. Let go of ego, organize yourself, and just take it one day at a time. And yeah.
Wow. That sounds like a great mix of developer advice or advice for development. And as someone who works in health research project management, some of that other advice is great professional advice, with organization, prioritization of tasks. You even mentioned some, I guess, challenges with maybe like scope creep, right? Like kind of adding features or adding new things and maybe kind of getting lost in that, or getting maybe detracted from that. So yeah, it was really cool to hear that. Do you have formal training in software development?
Yeah, I graduated with a bachelor's in science in computer science.
Cool. Well, those are great pieces of advice. I wanted to loop back around to hear what your relationship with TTRPGs is. What did you start with, and what are you playing these days?
I came into tabletop RPGs. I think that like watching CyberpunkRED, like a Polygon playthrough with like Brian David Gilbert and some other great personalities, was probably one of my first exposures to tabletop RPGs that I realized like that actually looks really enjoyable to me. Because again, the D&D high fantasy genre didn't appeal to me that much, and I was too intimidated to get into it. And then from there, I started watching a lot of other shows like Critical Role and then Dimension 20. And when I watched those, I realized like this is actually something I could really enjoy. Like I love board games and card games and video games. Of course, I've mentioned that. And once I had like been exposed to it enough, I realized this is something that I want to do. And so I did a few D&D campaigns. I did Curse of Strahd all the way through with a group of friends, that was like the most significant tabletop RPG undertaking I've had. I've played a little bit of Red with a group of friends, but the struggle for me these days is that I am sort of overwhelmed as is with the load that's in my life, that I don't feel capable of putting together, like of being a GM and putting together a group of people to play with. And I also I don't have anyone that I don't feel comfortable like bringing other people's arms and to like be like, hey, you should host this thing. And I'm also too shy to engage online and try and play virtually with strangers. And so recently I just haven't been playing at all. And what it comes down to often is just like it often feels like a choice of like either I can enjoy and play tabletop RPGs or I can work on tabletop RPGs. And often I've got enough to do on the working on tabletop RPGs that I don't have the time to go and play them. And I would like for that to change, and I think that one day it will. But for now, it's just too easy to hop on the computer and pull up a game that I enjoy as my sort of social relax thing. That I just haven't been playing, which is really unfortunate. And I feel I often feel quite a bit of imposter syndrome for having such an active hand in tabletop RPGs while also like not getting to play them very often. But it is what it is.
Well, we can talk more offline, but I want to say you're always welcome at my table, whether that's Cyberpunk, Mothership, or Cloud Empress, whether that's recorded or not recorded.
Heck yeah. Thank you very much for the invite. We'll talk more, and I am interested. And it's just a schedule thing, but we'll chat.
For sure. Even if it's, a single session or what, drop in, drop out.
Totally.
Let's see. So we're coming to the end of this. I wanted to circle back a little bit. I know you're busy enough, but is there anything that you'd like to say about like what's next for you? What's on the horizon for you?
As far as the projects go, next things for me are getting the Mothership companion app updated to like the 1.0 rule set for Mothership. Basically, get it to have parity with the stuff that's going to be printed and published. And we're just working with Tuesday Night Games to put together the list of things that need to be changed so that I can go implement them. And then I mentioned Danger Gal Dossier is coming out for the CyberpunkRED companion, in addition to like very large, at least code-wise, like redesign. And there's a lot of aesthetic differences now, but it still has the same workflows and stuff. And then from there, it's pretty much, it becomes a question of like, how do I divide my time? I really like to be doing more Mothership work because we've sort of got what I like to call, and what in the industry we often call the minimum viable product, which is like the smallest, like the simplest version of this thing that still provides a lot of value. And I think that with the Mothership app, we're kind of just a little bit past that stage. But like I said, I'd love to put out additional sort of in-app purchases or whatever for shipbreaker toolkits, and these other things. But yeah, either I'm working on that as like my next things, or I'm catching up on some of the stuff that's missing from the CyberpunkRED companion in terms of free DLCs, and gearing up to do the Edge Runners book that should be coming out here shortly. I also have a like habit, like goal app that I've been working on for years now as well, that I use every day but have yet to publish because I just have been working on other stuff. The whole purpose of that is to sort of gamify doing the like daily tasks that we don't necessarily want to do, and then rewarding yourself for achieving those. So it'll be called points. If you do your exercise for the day, or write in a journal, or work on your hobby projects or whatever, you get an arbitrary number of points, whatever you decide for that. And then you have like milestones that you're working towards and things that you reward yourself for that are also worth points. And so if you have a reward that you want that's worth like 500 points, then you're just doing these tasks every day to accumulate them, which also sort of solved the problem I had where it's like, I want to be buying stuff for myself, or like I want to be going out to eat or going on vacations or whatever. Like I want to reward myself for the hard work that I'm doing, but I want to also feel like I've earned it. And I also want to be keeping up these habits. And so that's what this app is sort of, hopefully it helps me a lot. And I think that there are people out there that would also enjoy and benefit it from as well, to sort of gamify our personal improvements and the things that we don't enjoy doing so that we can enjoy them a little more and reward ourselves. So one day I'll publish that too. We'll see.
I expect a lot of people would be interested in checking that out, and could possibly benefit from something like that. And who knows, maybe a couple of years down the line, someone will be knocking on your door to license it in another language.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so yeah, you have all those apps going on. I mean, I spoke with Watt, the creator of Cloud Empress RPG, a few weeks ago. Have there been any thoughts toward working on that game? Is there anything you can say about that?
The world of Cloud Empress definitely appeals to me. I love the sort of Ghibli collection, and Nausicaa is very, very evocative. And I think it'd be very cool to I'll have to go. I haven't dug into like the rules for it yet, and so I don't know in which ways it deviates from Mothership and in which ways it doesn't. And so the question is like first thing is really just, do I have the time to like even think about it in a meaningful way? And if so, would it be sort of an extension to the existing Mothership app where it's like downloadable content that you can get, where it changes like the theme of the app and moves things around a little bit, but has like the Cloud Empress stuff, essentials in it as part of the Mothership app? Or does it become spun off into its own thing and maybe share some common code with Mothership? And I definitely, as I listened to that episode, I definitely thought about it. But they're things higher on the priority list for me right now that I won't promise anything of anything right now, but it's on my mind. So we'll see.
That's understandable, but I think there are listeners that would have asked that question for
Right.
sure, or
Totally. Yep.
so I wanted to make sure I did that. So we're coming up on just these two last questions. I wanted to circle back a little bit. Are there hobbies that you share with your son, or actually as you share as a family?
My son, as we covered a little bit, is pretty developmentally delayed. He's coming up on 5 and he still doesn't really understand language. He can get basic commands from us and will sometimes say words, but can't do a sentence. And so a lot of my existing basically none of my existing hobbies do we like share. But we still have a lot of stuff that we really enjoy doing together. I pride myself a little bit in just like making everyday little things fun and silly. And so we'll do just a lot of like chase games, and like we'll gamify chores like doing dishes and stuff and make it exciting and clap for him and celebrate when he helps. And then we love watching some shows together and just snuggling up. Right now we're watching Bluey, which is just the best. I highly recommend Bluey as a new dad because it's just the best children's media out there, I think, that's also like really great for parents. And then we're watching Avatar: The Last Airbender through again because I just love it. But with him, I can't bring him to where I am right now. I have to meet him where he is, and every day that looks a little bit different, but we try to make it every day just fun and engaging for him, because I think that that's massively important to the development of any kid. And I think that I had neglected that early in his life, and so I'm trying to do a great job now of making home a fun place for him and making our relationship an engaging one. So yeah.
Incredible. So before we park this conversation, do you have anyone you'd like to shout out at this time?
Definitely Seth Devianaut, the Night City IO designer and designer of the Mothership Companion. He's been awesome to work with throughout all of this. And definitely Sean McCoy, who was super supportive of the Mothership app and us getting that out to the world and as polished as it is. 1,000,000% my wife, because I think that especially in the early days of me working on these apps, I was dropping the ball in other aspects of my life. Like I think that I wasn't being a fantastic husband or father, and I wasn't bad, but I definitely left a lot of slack on this journey that she had to pick up. And part of the reason that my progress is so much slower these days is because I'm trying to be better in other aspects of my life. I'm trying to spend more time with my wife, more time with my kid, more time with my friends. Because for a while it was just work and these companion apps. And that's also why one day I really hope to just make these my full-time thing, because I know that they're not getting a lot of the love that they deserve sometimes where I go with my binge mind. And then definitely just a shout out to like all the community members. And there's a Patreon out there for CyberpunkRED Companion, and the patrons of that have been awesome and patient and extremely kind. And it's just the community at large, like these apps get quite well reviewed. I'm always getting great feedback, and it's almost most of the communication is very, very positive and helpful. And so I'm very appreciative of that, and also very much acknowledge that like I am not a great advertiser of these apps. Really, all of the success is due to the word of mouth of the people in the community and the advertisement of people like Artel Sorian and Tuesday Night Games. So just thanks to you guys as the listeners for being here and supporting me and the apps, and also supporting Escape Vector. You guys rock as well. So thank you.
Thanks so much, and hope to talk again soon. And that was Andrew Sheridan. I hope you enjoyed that interview, and you learned something about the companion apps and the lead developer behind them. Across iOS and Android, the CyberpunkRED companion app has about 82,000 downloads and installations. Across iOS and Android, the Mothership companion application has about 10,000 downloads and installs. Both the CyberpunkRED and Mothership companion apps can be found on mobile app stores, like the Apple App Store and the Android or Google Play Store. They are both free and have their own sorts of premium features to pay for. For Cyberpunk, there is a cheap one-time payment to unlock world info, the encounter builder, and some handy GM tools. You can also purchase access to content from the supplements. For example, the publishers of Cyberpunk released a huge gearbook called Black Chrome. For Mothership, you can unlock premium features with a one-time payment like rapid random character generation and unlimited character slots. Try the apps, and if you like them and want to support their development and Andrew, or want to give him a tip, buy the premium. You can also subscribe to the Patreon for the CyberpunkRED companion app. I will put the link in the show notes. In Night City, life is cheap. I can generate or streamline as many gonks as I want for the meat grinder. And for Mothership, I love seeing what random characters get generated. And those poor bastards don't have a chance against the terrors of an uncaring and weird universe. Our music is from Epidemic Sound. Check the show notes for credits. Please connect with us online. You can reach us on Instagram or by email. We'd love to hear from you. One way you could support this show is by telling your friends and your gaming community about us. And another way is locking on to our signal by subscribing to our feed. And while you're at it, set up a notification alert so you don't miss an episode. As always, thanks to our listeners. Over and out.